Hello, everyone. It's Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. I'm Joshua Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Stephen Tollafield and Gabby Martin, as we're all located in our respective holiday venues to discuss the new holiday classic, Hawkeye, the season finale. So this is Christmas. How you both doing, Gabby?
I'm good. I am, as you can see, in the dark. I am in possibly witness protection. No, I'm not. I'm just having some lighting issues here. But yeah, I'm not just riding high on obviously Hawkeye was amazing, but still riding the kind of Spider-Man No Way Home high and serotonin kick. So yeah, it's
finishing strong for us Marvel fans, definitely.
Agreed. Stephen, where are you? And how was your holiday?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. I'm here in Ohio visiting family and zooming in from remote. But also, it's Boxing Day, but it's also the Feast of Stephen. So for those of you who celebrate, you can feast upon your favorite Stephen or just wish them well. And I am too really excited about the way that that Hawkeye ended up. It was just such a great, heartwarming story and super fun, very climactic final battle scene. I will say I haven't yet caught No Way Home just with all the holiday travels yet. So, but I have despite my best efforts, seen a couple spoilers. So I wouldn't be too spoiled if something came up.
We will avoid blowing anything big. So other than I will, my opinion, No Way Home is the best superhero movie ever, just because of what they pull off.
Yeah.
And the Hawkeye season finale, the entire Hawkeye series, I think is one of the best TV shows that they've done, because I believe that the smaller, grounded stories work better. This is what Falcon and the Winter Soldier should have been. And it was good characters. It was solid. They tied up all the loose ends. If you put Loki at number one just because of that, and then you can duke it out between WandaVision or Hawkeye. I would put Hawkeye just because it tied up a little better with its more kind of like grounded final fight. But that's me. Reasonable minds may differ on that as well. So, do either of you have thoughts on that?
Oh my God, that's a big on the Spider
Way Home, I think it was just
fantastic. Definitely. I'd have to watch it again. I've only watched it once, so I'd have to watch it again to kind of give an official ranking. But definitely, and Josh, you and I talked about this offline, but it really is kind of a love letter to comics and what comic books are all about. And I think what I will say, not trying to spoil anything, but I think what they achieved is what, the kind of banter, the witty banter that we see in the comics, the silliness of comics, a little bit of the absurd sometimes. I can see kind of live action being hesitant to put that to the screen because it can be silly, it can be almost absurd, but I think they did it with such finesse and in such a good strong way that hopefully we'll see that. Obviously not all the time. You don't want to kind of oversaturate anything, but hopefully we'll see that peppered in going forward, that we are maybe moving away from the kind of dark Zack Snyder comic book films, right? That really going back to what comic books are and what they provide us in terms of fiction and fantasy and storytelling. But ranking Hawkeye, I'm not sure where I'd rank it necessarily. I think all the Marvel TV projects are very separate and distinct, with the exception being Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think that's its own weird thing that, was a kind of could have had so much potential There were a lot of good things about it as far as, kind of the racial story. But there was so much bad about it. I think what Hawkeye does very well, and it's just, like you said, Josh, it's very kind of low to the ground. It's very tight. It wraps everything up. You're not left kind of wondering anything. And it's just very, neat and packaged. And I think, we should see some more of that. I want to see like kind of Hallmark style, every holiday gets a Marvel movie, or Marvel like little mini series. And maybe that's asking too much, but that's my Christmas wish for 2022. But Stephen, what do you think?
Gosh, I'm really excited to see No Way Home now. It sounds like it's so amazing. So I'm really excited to check it out. In terms of the TV shows, yeah, Loki was just so fun and so beautifully produced, and the performances were so great. And I didn't expect to like Owen Wilson as much as I did. I was so impressed with his performance and their connection. Tom Hiddleston and they were just had great chemistry. It was so fun to watch. I think WandaVision probably is going to be number 2 for me, just because I think the writing of that really resonated with me. The way that they addressed those themes, and like they just got grief right in ways that I just haven't seen it done before, and it was really, really cool to watch. And those characters are great, and I love them. But yeah, you're right, Josh. It's a very tough call between WandaVision and Hawkeye for that number 2 spot.
Yeah, they're all solid, with the one exception, and I think that was pandemic related because they had to do some rewrites and reshoots. So it'd be interesting to see what the original story was planned to be in that case. But when it comes to, again, the big 3, they tied things up. They this one stuck the landing. Loki stuck the landing. WandaVision kind of stuck the landing. It didn't. If it was an aircraft carrier, it didn't catch the 3rd wire, but it didn't go into the net. So, but it was still, for those who understand that reference. Yeah, but again, this being Hawkeye was just really well done, and character exploration that you don't normally get to see in a movie unless you do it small scale. And I think that also highlights, don't do movies with like 30 characters. Like, you do the top 3 and everything works well that way. But with this, we do have some legal analysis that we could jump into. And we begin with Yelena somehow recording. I don't know how she pulled that off, but she was able to record Kingpin and Eleanor getting some very damning statements. And one of you explored the eavesdropping issue, and I think it was Gabby.
Yeah.
And if you could tag in, and let's start there, and then we'll get into how we get that into evidence.
Yeah. So
I think based on
the camera angle, and maybe this is us kind of looking a little too deep at all of this kind of stuff. We see the camera angle. Obviously, we're kind of there real time, and then we pan out to what Kate is watching this recording, and it seems from the camera angle that it may be like a security feed that Yelena hacked into, which I would not put it past kind of the Black Widow system to teach the widows how to hack into things amongst their many skill sets. So I can see her hacking into a kind of security feed. And this seems to be his kind of space. Obviously, this is a different Kingpin than the Netflix series, right? This is not a story continuity. This is the same actor, but a different character.
Actually, so there was an interview with the actor. It's supposed to be the same Kingpin, and with the idea that the blip really took down his empire. So so he's in a rebuilding state. He feels vulnerable. So I don't know where Vanessa is.
Interesting. See, I took it like I want ambiguous because you'd have to kind of watch the interview to get that. There's no kind of um, there's no specifying that in the narrative. So I'm wondering if they're going to leave that ambiguous and just let people make their own conclusions. Because I took it, just kind of the look and feel of this Kingpin. I took it as a kind of completely different character. Obviously, he's more attached to Echo. There's a whole kind of backstory there that, obviously he had this child that he was, guardian of as she was growing older. So how does that work? But I'm sure they'll leave it ambiguous. That being said, I can see him having a security camera or some sort of recording device in his lair or space that he's kind of recording conversations for blackmail purposes. And that's what Yelena hacks into. However, Yelena is now guilty of a felony of eavesdropping, which is a Class E felony in the state of New York under New York Penal Code 250-05. So when you unlawfully engage in wiretapping, overhearing a conversation, or intercepting any sort of communication. And normally, so all states have some sort of consent. Some states, like here in Connecticut, we're a two-party consent. So you must consent of both parties in a conversation in order to record it. New York has a one-party consent rule where as long as one party consents to the recording, usually if you're the one, like a member of a party to the conversation, you consent, you're kind of good in the state of New York. But neither Kingpin nor Eleanor gave consent in this case, so that kind of goes out the window, kind of justifying and making this kind of a legally recorded conversation. So the only exception that would not be available to Yelena in this case is where people are communicating in space where they should not have an expectation of privacy. If this conversation was happening in Central Park, Yelena would kind of be free and clear, because obviously there may be other issues for having recording devices and wiretapping devices. That's a whole separate issue. But if she's just kind of going about her business and just kind of people watching in Central Park and overhears this conversation, she's totally in the clear, because you would not have an expectation of privacy in Central Park having kind of a secret clandestine conversation. But they were in his office, secret location, so they definitely had an expectation.
There's big issue with how did she get it? Because Kingpin doesn't seem like the type of guy to have cameras in his office. I mean, that's bad guys have learned from the Nixon administration. Don't do that. Like at least with LBJ, he could turn it on and off on command, but Nixon just said like, hey, let's just record everything. And because of that, you think the Kingpin, who's the kingpin of crime, would not be cool with, let's just have a security camera off in the corner just for kicks. And this is where I'm doing my crime lord business. It's like that makes the window theory seem more plausible, which then raises the issue of how did she get the good audio if that was the case. So what did she do, and how did no one in broad daylight not notice her like scale a building to like get cell phone footage? So, or was it a drone? Like what did she use? But that was my reaction, like how the heck did she get that? And then just texting video makes sense, but yeah, the hacking is the most logical, but I have a tough time with it just because the Kingpin being who he is.
Yeah. It's just like plot device, capital P, capital D, super spy, they can do whatever. But I did notice that at the end of the previous episode, when Yelena snaps the picture of of Eleanor and Fisk together and sends it to Kate. As she kind of like steps, as they show Yelena kind of stepping away from that observation, she kind of looks up, like as she's like kind of taking stock of what the building facade looks like. So I wonder if maybe she had like scaled the building or something. But yeah, it's one of those suspension of disbelief things. You're like, oh, now the super spy has the video feed. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, except for who it is, because you don't. Why would the bad guys have cameras? So like that's the big issue. But and moving on, how do we get that into court? So there's, because of what we see at the end, pardon me, there's an arrest warrant for Eleanor, and she's getting arrested for the murder of Armand III, which means a warrant got executed, which meant there had to be probable cause. That video would be a great source for probable cause, but could also be fruit of the poisonous tree if it's illegally obtained. So you get some serious problems right out of the gate in talking about this. And I'll jump on some of the evidentiary issues that in order for something to be admissible, that it has to, you need someone who can authenticate it. And that means it's somebody with knowledge and they can explain what it purports to be. Well, okay, the super spy who took the video theoretically is that person. Yes, I shot that video. I would want to know, is there metadata with it that shows time, location, date, all those helpful things that can show that it's trustworthy on where this conversation took place. And that can be helpful if you don't have the super spy to testify. So there's just a problem with getting this in front of a judge and getting the judge to say, okay, that's a party admission. You have someone making the statement, I took care of Armand. Armand is now dead. That could be probable cause that Eleanor killed or had killed Armand III. Okay, that's great. But is that admissible still because of the other factors that we're dealing with here of where did the video come from? Was it illegally obtained? Because is the court going to overlook that mulligan going like, well, we know this is tainted, so we're not going to use it? Is there anything else that we could go get that shows that would be independent of this wrongly obtained video? That's the golden goose, because of what Eleanor says on camera is extremely helpful for what's called a party admission or a declaration against interest. So New York State and the federal rules of evidence both speak to this because it raises issues of hearsay, which is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. In this case, the statement is, I took care of Armand. Okay. Well, in New York, defendants' own statements can be received in evidence as a party admission, and there's case law for that. Admissions by a party of any fact material to the issue are always competent evidence against him or them, whenever, wherever, or to whomever made. Okay, that might be enough to get through one of the video issues of how did it come to being, if a court's willing to overlook that it wasn't a police officer or a federal agent that illegally obtained it. It was a non-state actor who did. So we're going to ignore the wrongfulness and just go, yeah, what she says is bad, and we don't want murderers running around. Now, if we were going to do this on the federal side, we have something called a statement, a declaration against interest, or a statement against interest. Normally, the declarant would be unavailable, and reasonable. what you have is it's very similar, that there's a person saying something that would be cause them liability or put them into legal jeopardy. And the person making it, according to case law, has to know that the statement would be harmful to them. I took care of Armand. She's probably phrasing it that way, because outright saying I had Armand killed or I killed Armand would be the gift wrap version of this. But I think that would be sufficiently damning, at least for getting an arrest warrant issued. Now, we have other evidence notes here, and Gabby, I have a feeling you put those in. Care to jump in?
Yeah, it was fun to do the breakdown into the evidentiary issues, because this was my first involvement with the Legal Geeks, was doing an essay on the federal rules of, or an article on the federal rules of evidence in the Clone Wars. So this was really kind of cool and full circle. But I think what we need to look at is, you know, I preface this by saying I'm not a criminal defense lawyer. I'm not a criminal law lawyer in any way, shape, or form. Like, all I have is based on classes I took in law school. That being said, it is my understanding that rules of evidence and all that kind of balancing and type of rules do not apply when you're going to apply for arrest warrant. So you can determine probable cause based on hearsay. So you wouldn't have the type of kind of rule considerations that you would have if this, you know, she's been arrested, now we're at trial. So what I would think a judge would look at is there some way to yes, we're using I agree with you, Josh, wholeheartedly, that there's obviously kind of fruit of the poisonous tree issues to consider. But a judge may consider, would this actually go into evidence in a trial? Because you could have Eleanor up on the stand, right? That's a consideration of whether you want a defendant to testify in their own defense. But she could make a plea deal, right? And they can say, you know, we know that you were talking with Kingpin. They could get Kingpin to flip, right? If they catch her, because they're obviously looking for him as well. And, you know, so they could get Yelena to testify, right? Yelena to testify that she took this video. We don't know how the cops got a hold of the video, whether it was through Yelena, whether it was through Kate. Theoretically, it seems to be Kate is the most likely person that submitted this, right? So, and the arresting detective, right, is the one who originally called her. So this may have been part of a longer conversation with Kate, that Kate says, you know, I befriended this person and she took this video, still here in New York, you know, if she wants to. So there's all those kind of considerations that, you know, possible witness and all this stuff would be able to add that back, you know, the backup as far as evidence that you wouldn't necessarily need to rely on this video alone. I think what this video alone is kind of that thrust to kind of get probable cause. And we don't know what other evidence the cops may have had on Eleanor. They may have seen through her kind of shoddy kind of fabrication of evidence against Armand, or I'm sorry, against Jack. So we don't know what kind of evidence they had. It's important to note, though, this video would definitely not be admissible at trial unless they had Yelena get up there and, you know, obviously, like you said, Josh, authenticate the video that she was the one who took it. We've seen that, right, of witnesses in as in like the George Floyd case of testifying and authenticating a video they took of something. And especially, you know, it gets dicier if you're prove the truth of the matter asserted, right? That's when you get into kind of hearsay issues. Hearsay is any statement that's not made in court under oath. And they would be, right, if they were using it to say that Kingpin was wearing a white tuxedo on such and such a day. sure, like that easier to get in, right? Because they're not using the truth of what they're stating in the video. They're just saying here's a picture of him that he was wearing this particular outfit on this particular day. But they are using it for the truth of the matter asserted, likely not going to get in. Even if they get kind of hearsay obstacles, you still have Rule 403. That's the balancing act, right? That's kind of the full backstop to the rules of evidence that says that the prejudicial value of a piece of evidence it outweighs the probative value of the piece of evidence. And Eleanor's got to get a good lawyer, probably not Matt Murdock, but a good lawyer in New York City. And she's going to have somebody who's going to make that argument was not getting in. But it could be used along with other things that the cops may have to support an arrest warrant.
Well, that one thing that would be helpful to the police is the fact that Kate saw the argument between Armand and Eleanor way back in episode 1, which raises the issue of daughter testifying against mother in court, which would ruin all future Christmases. There's no doubt that would blow every holiday out of the water. It would not be okay.
I think she's been adopted then.
Yeah,
she's
and
not New York anymore.
Yeah. No, and Jack should probably break off the engagement. There's no Hallmark card for "I framed you for murder," but yeah, there are issues with that. But I do think the probable cause is there. Trial gets sticky because of the admissibility issues, unless, again, as you brilliantly pointed out, this is to get Eleanor to flip on Kingpin, because if she does have her Pearl Harbor file, the police will want that. And so they could charge her, arrest her, charge her, plea deal of some kind. The dogs are protecting the homeland.
I think this would definitely be used, as that weight to, for the cops to kind of throw their weight around and, put Eleanor in a interrogation room, play her the video and say, like, turn over this kind of file, be evidence against, be a witness against Kingpin. They obviously don't know the showdown that took place between but this would be used to kind of very heavy-handedly kind of push her into flipping as a witness.
Yeah, and that's a great observation you made, Gabby, about the fact that Kate may have that existing relationship with that detective, that investigator who called her and who said that, invited her down to the station the following morning to have a conversation. And that happened off screen, if it happened at all, as far as I recall.
I don't think it happened. I think this was kind of closing the loop on that maybe it took her a couple days to get back to him, but she did. She got back to him.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right that it probably the video recording, like you said, the probable cause hearings for an arrest warrant aren't necessarily bound by the rules of evidence. So that might have just been another, needle on the haystack or sort of the straw that broke the camel's back if they already had like a lot of information kind of connecting the dots that was enough to give the judge probable cause to issue that warrant to arrest Eleanor at the end of the episode.
I think this will be a fun question for all of our judge friends for, would you sign that warrant? Because I think some of them would take pause with like, wait a minute, like, are we going to go through all of this and not be able to actually have a trial and have it get thrown out very quickly? Like, that's not judicial economy. Like, that's so yeah, I would hope they found more things, that Kate's phone call was enough of a, hopefully Kate made a phone call because she seemed to know the police would be on their way to arrest her mom. And which, again, that is what heroes do. They do make hard choices. And while Christmas is the time for forgiveness, Eleanor killed the dude. Like, you don't get to, that's not a mulligan for like, hey, birth of Christ, you killed the dude. We're just going to overlook that. That's something for you to discuss with the minister. you don't get the judge to go, oh, you crazy kids. Money was hard, so therefore we're going to overlook murder and a decade of criminal activity. Which brings us to, after that expose on evidence, prosecuting Kingpin and Eleanor. So it raises a significant issue with RICO, which is the Racketeering Act. That's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which Kingpin's the poster boy for that. There's lots going on from Daredevil seasons 1 to 3 of all of his naughty criminal activities to make New York a nice place. When you think about it that way, it does feel kind of weird that one of the most dynamic villains in the MCU is doing really creative redevelopment. But it's racketeering, which is it's unlawful for any person who has received any income derived directly or indirectly from a pattern of racketeering activity or through collection of unlawful debt in which a person has participated as a principal within the meaning of Section 2, and we have a description there. And Eleanor's business seems to have been a front for some naughty activity with doing massive surveillance on people with, giant privacy violations, and then, having someone bumped off. On the flip side, you get Kingpin with, the Fat Man auto dealership that was laundering money. The moving business for Trust to Bro is laundering money. So that's all income being derived from corrupt activities. So there's a lot there. We also have some notes, and I'm going to go with Gabby. Did you raise the issue of how did Bishop Security support Kingpin?
Did not. That was Stephen. But I did want to mention really quick that the other thing they could get him on, we have this kind of layer of RICO statutes, but you also have that all this income, even though it's illegal, as my tax professor would say, the great Mary Ferrari, even though they are making this money illegally, they still got to pay the piper, aka the IRS. And if they have not, the IRS will come a calling. So they may be able to get them on tax evasion charges as well, which is, as we know, is how all good gangsters are taken down by the mighty IRS. So there are probably tax evasion and tax fraud considerations to take into account, in addition to all the RICO money laundering goodness. So, Stephen, I'll turn it over to you.
We may have an unsecure Google Doc, because I don't know that I added that either. So someone has some thoughts that they didn't recall.
That might have been me at night when I was just musing. So,
I will say too that the stat. It's interesting that the stat says the collection of an unlawful debt, which makes me think about the nature of the debt that Derek Bishop owed to Kingpin that Eleanor claims to have repaid 10 times over. And I don't really know the comics, but do either of you is that in reference to something that is sort of known, or is that just kind of a mystery?
Unknown. I did pick up the trailer back of what was the inspiration for this. I haven't read it because, holidays, work, and other stuff, but it's waiting. It is waiting, and I look forward to it.
Yeah.
That said, boy howdy, lots of money's been spent here. I don't know why the deceased bishop thought it'd be a good idea to borrow money from the mob. Like, what was, if you're like old money, you think a bank would, you got collateral with that giant penthouse, and if you own the entire building, you think you could get a loan in Manhattan for that and not need to get in with the mob, unless Kingpin had a front and Derek got suckered somehow and ended up entrapped by Kingpin, which would be on brand for Kingpin. But again, it was just glorious to see that. Now let's turn to what I think is one of the best parts of the episode, and that's Yelena versus Kate. I would be fine if there was just like 24 minutes of them trying to get to a coffee shop. We have it starts with the elevator, so we have another great elevator fight, and I mean it's very different than Winter Soldier because instead of like a fight for your life, it's two people who don't want to actually harm each other, but they also are trying to like one's trying to carry out her objective and the other is trying to stop her. But no one really wants to get hurt and hurt someone. And it raises issues of how do we define this fight? And there are a couple ways. Yelena says, I'm going to go kill Barton. And Kate's like, no, you're not. And it raises the issue, is this mutual combat? Is it defense of others? And let's just go down the list. And I started the notes here, and either of you tag in as you feel necessary. So did they enter mutual combat? While it looks like they're both literally slapping each other or kicks to the ribs, mutual combat is where both parties enter a fight willingly. There are other long definitions of it, but that's the crux of this. This doesn't, there are elements that definitely look like they're both fighting each other willingly. You do get the reason for Kate fighting Yelena is the fact that Kate doesn't want her to kill Clint Barton, which raises defense of others. In New York, this is New York Penal Law 35.15, a person may use physical force upon another person when and to the extent he or she reasonably believes to be necessary to defend himself, herself, or a third person from what they reasonably believe to be the use of imminent use or unlawful physical force by such a person, unless, and there's a big unless here, that the later's conduct was provoked by the actor with the intent to cause physical injury to another. Well, in our case, Yelena states her intent, and this would be Hillman intent. I'm going to go kill Clint Barton. She's a Black Widow assassin. It's known she has a grudge. Kate was around for round one of the fight. They had mac and cheese together. She knows what Yelena wants to do. So, yeah, Kate could clearly state, I was doing all of this to stop Yelena, which is why I slapped her across the face, which just the reaction was just so good.
When she like hits her hand, ow, that really hurt. Like it just underscores how they didn't really want to hurt each other. They just kind of want to like neutralize each other and kind of contain them. And so Yelena is so surprised when she's like, ow, that really hurt. Like, and then they're like complimenting each other, like how cool those moves were. That was such a great moment. I think the imminence in the sort of the defense of others is tricky because then it requires, in my mind, that's always like, they have the gun pointed at the victim and then someone else kind of body tackles the assailant to prevent that imminent injury, where Yelena sort of knew that Clint was on the 12th floor, but she didn't necessarily exactly know where he was, I guess. And then she kind of like happened to be at the window that was directly above where Clint was shooting. So maybe she did know exactly where he was. It's very unclear, obviously, but yeah, but the mutual combat, I think, is really interesting, how they were both so skilled in fighting that they could both take their hits without, being seriously injured, but at the same time were, hitting each other hard enough to try to stop each other's progress, which is really fun to watch.
Yeah, their chemistry is just so good. It's just, and again, the humor of like Kate doing this spin and the dress comes off and shows her archery uh, outfit with like, did you plan to do that? Yes. Just I mean, it's just so fun.
It
So
was
fun.
very sibling like, right? Like they when you're fighting their sister and you're like roughhousing, and then it's all fun until like someone actually takes a hit to the nose or something, and someone's nose starts bleeding, and then you're like, oh wait, you crossed a line. But yeah, and I noticed too that there was a fun thing like at the end of Yelena and Kate's confrontation. I think it's Yelena that says, yeah, that was really fun, thanks, and then sort of leaves. But then a few scenes later, Cassie says, this will be fun, and then Bart, after he knocks Cassie out, he's like, you're right, that was fun. There was like that two physical confrontations that were characterized as fun in very different ways. That was fun writing.
Yeah, because there's a lot of parallels in this with Kazi definitely wants to kill Barton, and Yelena wants to kill Barton. Kate doesn't want to hurt Yelena. There's like, it's Christmas Eve, let's go get drinks. Like, she's literally trying to defuse the situation, even after getting kicked to the ribs. Like, that's or Yelena getting the I don't know what the weapon's called, but the throw-in device that's aligned with two weights at the end, and like her reaction, like, ow, that really hurt. It's like, so the kick to the ribs, like, it was perfect. And I would love to see those actresses do more things together as those characters, because it's just it was delightful. Gabby, care to tag in?
I mean, I think definitely defense of others, like Stephen said, it is a bit tricky with the imminence thing. But to Kate's point, you put yourself in Kate's shoes. She didn't know where Clint was. She didn't know how quickly Yelena was going to find him, because remember, they got separated. So when she saw the 12th floor, Yelena saw the 12th floor. She believed, as soon as Yelena got onto the 12th floor, she was going to kill Clint. She also doesn't know what sort of weapons Yelena has on her, right? So Yelena, for all Kate knows, Yelena may have something that can injure him from a distance, right? She doesn't need necessarily to his head to kill him. She's already seen Yelena use the widow's bite that can be shot from a distance. Yelena has made very clear that she has multiple weapons on her person, and those could be any number of things, given that she's an assassin. So it could be like throwing stars or something, right? So I think putting ourselves into Kate's shoes, I think that imminence really becomes a little tricky, because she really doesn't know how imminent that threat to Clint is. But yeah, that was by far my favorite scene in the episode. I could watch hours, just like time and time again. Florence Pugh as Yelena is my favorite character in the MCU these days. Just, it's such a different type of humor than we've seen, right? Clint and Jeremy Renner has kind of been the kind of comic relief, especially in the Avengers film, which getting to see him really breathe and kind of show the kind of weary, tired hero is great, and kind of step out of that comedic relief role. Obviously, he still has funny stuff to do and funny stuff to say, but it's not kind of all his character anymore. But Florence Pugh as Yelena is just great. It's hilarious. Every beat, the hand slapping thing, hours and not be bored. Like, it would be funny every single time, because it's just hilarious. So I could watch a whole TV show of them, and I'm really excited to see what they put together, because obviously both of them are going to be coming, I would imagine, for Young Avengers. So to see what that looks like, given who we know is also going to be in the Young Avengers, think Patriot, America Chavez, maybe, Stature, right? So you see all these little things. I think if they put together a Young Avengers, I would love to see a Young Avengers TV show. I think the humor of just different types of would be fantastic. Like it would be a nonstop kind of, just funny. So
I wonder, was the slap scripted or was that improvised?
I've read that most of that scene was improvised, and that most of their dialogue, especially like the mac and cheese scene, was improvised.
Okay.
So it's just their chemistry and the way they kind of bounce off each other.
That's just raw talent right there of two people who can interact and have it be fun. Because Florence Pugh looks surprised with the slap. So like, which is just like, that was either really well acted or just like, oops. And she stayed in character. So that was just glorious, just glorious. Which brings us then to, there's lots of attempted murder in this. And tracking it all is hard. But Clint has two people trying to kill him, Kazi and Yelena, both of whom take shots at Clint. So we do have attempted murder by both of them of Clint Barton. Kate has Kazi trying to just taking shots with the rifle with the scope and intentionally trying to kill her. So we do have attempted murder there as well. Now, Stephen, you have some notes about transferred intent. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, just because you are trying to murder someone and your shot goes stray and murders someone else, you don't have a defense that you didn't kill the person you intended to kill. And specifically in New York, there's this. It's codified in Penal Law 125-251. Which says that it transfers the intent for a homicide to the person who was actually killed if you're engaged in conduct where you're attempting to kill someone else. So Kazi would be on the hook for any homicides that resulted from his misfires into a crowded Christmas Eve party from across Rockefeller Center. So yeah, he would certainly, if he hadn't gone down to the, and I guess it's not 100% clear that he's dead at the end of the episode, but if he wasn't, he could still face charges for anyone who he hurt or who died as a result of his conduct.
Since you brought up the fact what happens to him, just to highlight the parallels in storytelling, you have Echo fighting him with the intent of, I don't want to kill you, but she ends up killing him. With Yelena, I'm here to kill you, and has an awakening about what happened and changes her behavior. So just the fact that they had those juxtapositions, just great fun storytelling.
Great observation, yeah.
Well, I have to keep up my ground game with Gabby, who's really good at noticing that stuff. So she makes me pay more attention. So, Gabby, do you anything else on all the attempted murder in this episode?
This whole series is like, it's funny how we were talking about one of the last episodes, being all the kind of larceny that takes place, right, and theft, and here you have kind of all the attempted murder. So it's like every episode is crime theme related, and I can see a law school, especially a criminal law professor, using this show to demonstrate different types of crime. That would be amazing. I'm happy to do it if any law school is listening. But no, I think, yeah, it's definitely interesting, like you said, Josh, the kind of narrative that you have with, Yelena trying to kill Clint, and then obviously Kazi and Echo's fight, right? And I don't know what is happening with my light here. We're just having all sorts of technical issues today. But there is literally no lights, like flickering light. This is just the outsides. But yeah, I think what's interesting with, specifically directed to Kate, is he does have the intention to kill Kate. That if he had injured her, certainly the attempted murder of her, because he says that something along the lines of, "Oh, Kate's here, to Kate Bishop, and Hawkeye are here too." Well, he sees Hawkeye in the scope, but Kate Bishop is here too. So, kind of 2 for 1 or whatever he says. So he has the intention to kill her specifically. She would not be kind of subject to that transferred intent concept. But if he did hit anybody else, certainly, Rockefeller Center is a very large tourist destination in New York City. Any stray bullets would definitely that injured anybody would definitely put them on the hook for injuring them or killing them, as the case may be.
And Gabby, you mentioned the larceny in the other episodes, and I just wanted to interject really quickly because we had talked about when Kate went into Maya's apartment to steal the watch. We noted that at the time that if her intent was to restore the stolen property to its true owner, then Kate may have a defense to the larceny charge. And it turns out that ultimately we did see that the watch was returned to its rightful owner at the end of the episode. So I thought that was fun that was sort of resolved that question about whether she had a defense to the larceny charge.
Glorious. Well, let's talk about going down the side of Rockefeller Plaza, which I don't know how much of that was special effect, how much of that was practical, and how they recreated that look. I mean, having drones and the technology we have, people can do all kinds of great things and not actually be in physical danger. But
I think part of it may have been real, because we do know that this was all shot in New York City, which is why you have kind of that. I have talked about this, but that kind of gritty New York feel. Remember, we had kind of images coming from the shooting of Hawkeye super early. Remember, we saw Kate in costume, we saw Clint in costume. So we saw images very early on, because this was not kind of the typical Atlanta closed set. This was shot in New York. So I can imagine they obviously, the tree may have been special effects, because when they shot, I don't think they were shooting at Christmas time. So they would have shot in Rockefeller Center pre-Christmas time, when all of that stuff is set up. I can see them using the building to scale. I think that would have been very cool and a lot less technical. So it'd be interesting to know that.
But seeing a character say this is supposed to be scary, so refreshing, as opposed to the sure, I've never done this before, I'm just going to jump out the window. But she's acting like a normal person with I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And
Totally.
she does it.
Yep.
And it's not graceful. I mean, the interaction with her and Clint is fantastic with what are you doing? Are you okay? Very, very paternal and very sweet, but worth the price of admission. So
totally. Yeah. Well, just those sequences reminded me, because there's been in the last couple of years, a lot of news about people climbing things in New York. There was, in 2018, there was a woman who climbed the Statue of Liberty, sort of in protest of Donald Trump's immigration policies. And that was, of course, the Statue of Liberty is a federal national park, federal monument. So she was charged in the federal district court in the Southern District of New York. But then in 2020, a gentleman was arrested for climbing the New York Times building in October last year. And he was charged with reckless endangerment and with criminal trespass. And reckless endangerment presumably requires conduct that creates a grave risk of death or serious injury to other people. So presumably the theory was that he was climbing in a way that, if he fell, could fall on someone, like on an unsuspecting pedestrian below, and injure or kill them. But also I wondered if maybe they were tying into the fact that they had to get first responders to put themselves in dangerous situations to kind of get him down. So there was that. And then there was a criminal trespass, of course, when you are sort of in a building or in a on property that where you're not authorized to be, and so being on the exterior of someone's building is not authorized generally. So he was charged with that, and also so it seems like both Yelena and Kate could be similarly prosecuted for these crimes because they both were on the exterior of the building where there were pedestrians enjoying the 30 Rock holiday decorations below. And in fact, Kate kind of almost narrowly misses someone, I think, as she's kind of falling down the side of the building. So she's probably recklessly endangering people. And also the criminal trespass in the first degree requires the trespass while you're carrying an explosive or deadly weapon, which both of them are obviously doing. So I think both of them are going to be similarly charged to that person from October 2020.
Done. Yeah, you hear those stories, and it's like they did what? You scaled the building freestyle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, New York just lends itself to that. People are so like enamored with the skyline and everything, and they're like, "I'm going to climb that building," or doing the tightrope walk across the old World Trade Center. It's such a New York thing.
Yeah, and I look at that. Nope, no. So, going to Clint's fight on the 12th floor, which on some levels just has a hint of a Die Hard feel, just a hint of it, because it's also radically different. But we have the use of explosives on this building floor to take out tracksuits, and it's like that's destruction of property. Does the necessity defense apply to the use of explosives to being used in a form of self-defense to neutralize all of these mob enforcers? And the three-part test from the federal system is that there's no legal alternative to violating the law, the harm to be prevented is imminent, a direct causal relationship is reasonably anticipated to exist between the defendant's action and the avoidable harm. Well, here we definitely have a self-defense issue of Clint's trying to neutralize a whole bunch of people trying to kill him, and he uses possibly non-lethal means to bring down the ceiling to neutralize these attackers. I don't think it's clean, but I think it's an argument. Do either of you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, definitely it's tricky, right? Because could he have other options? Yes, his weapon is a bow and arrow. Have bow and arrowed shot, I don't know, whatever. All the kind of oncoming tracksuits. But there's a case to be made that this was the most efficient way to do it, to take out multiple people in a way that he would not come to, kind of very assuredly not come to harm, right? On the way, right? So it's choosing kind of destruction of property over killing people to neutralize. And I think in this case, there is, tends to be in his favor that there is a necessity to kind of blow up the building, although there may be an argument that, he would have to be very careful as to where he was placing those explosives, right? Because when you're exploding a building, you put it on the wrong beam or whatever, and you could possibly bring down that whole building, or at least start to bring down that whole building. Right? He lies in jeopardy by using these explosives to bring down the tracksuit. So it could go, I'd say 50-50 either way.
I can't imagine what the building inspector of New York is going to have to say about that too. Like they're going to have to shut down 30 Rock to like make sure that the structure is still safe, and that's just a whole administrative nightmare that he's just unpacked there for NBC. But yeah,
the fire department and
yeah,
code enforcement all getting calls Christmas Eve saying like, so hey buddy, we need you to come down here and inspect 30 Rock to make sure it's structurally sound. Oh, that would suck on so many levels. Or they just like evacuate and we'll do it on the 26th. Like what do you do?
It's a nightmare.
Oh, but it's hysterical. Well, which then brings us to just the overall fight with the tracksuits on the ice skating rink. Uh, well, no, let's change the order here. So let's talk about downing the Christmas tree. I understand the need to get Clint out of the tree. I'm not sure timber was the right plan. And Stephen, can you walk us through the necessity defense for downing the Rockefeller Christmas tree?
Yeah, I mean, I looked into it. The in New York, the common law of necessity defense is collapsed into a statute that talks about justification. It's Penal Laws 3505, and it says that conduct is not criminal that would otherwise be prosecutable if the conduct is necessary in an emergency to avoid imminent injury by reason of a situation that's not the fault of the actor. And there's the choice of evils analysis, whether the injury that's being avoided is outweighs the injury that's going to result if the person violates the law. So that first part is kind of tricky because Clint didn't seem like he was in any imminent risk of injury. He's already in the tree. He seemed like he was kind of stuck there. He wasn't really going anywhere. The only reason she says she has to get Clint out of the tree so that he can help fight. So I'm not sure that he has sort of an imminent injury at stake, and also that it's questionable whether this is all kind of the fault of the actors, sort of escalating this melee that's happening in Midtown Manhattan. But then also the choice of evil, if Clint's risk of injury or, being stuck by a few pine needles seems pretty low compared to toppling a 7-story fir tree in the middle of Manhattan. So she might not be able to take advantage of this defense at all, but it sure was good TV.
Gabby?
Yeah, and the other thing you have to consider is that obviously the plaza is being evacuated, right? But she could put people at jeopardy. She could put innocent civilians in jeopardy by downing that tree. I will say though that I really tend to think that scene was CGI'd, not just because of the time of year that they were filming in New York. But I'm going to create a big kind of spoiler, maybe, I don't know, breaking people's bubble. If you've ever not visited the Rockefeller Christmas tree, it is not that fluffy. I'm sorry. They do not fall. Trees, they're very loose. And I'm sure, with a little bit of gymnastics and maybe parkour that he's picked up from Peter Parker, he could have scaled that thing really quickly if it was a real life Rockefeller tree, because it would be very easy to climb up and very easy to climb down. There's none of that bush, kind of thick foliage nonsense. Yeah, no, that doesn't exist in reality. So, but that being said, I think, Kate is definitely, that was probably her most egregious thing. Her most egregious violation in this episode was downing the tree, specifically because it could have caused to others, right? This is not just a tree falling, right? You don't just think of the weight. As we see, there's an explosion of the lights kind of when they land that could kind of sparks glass of obviously the tree topper doesn't break miraculously. I'd like to know what it's actually made out of. But it's very much kind of putting people in jeopardy, even if those people tend to be tracksuits. They are still people, and they are still, I don't know, innocent, but they are civilians that could have been injured by the falling Christmas tree.
Yeah, it would be one thing if she used the tree as a weapon to literally crush a bunch of tracksuits. That might be more defendable than I needed Clint out of the tree. So I'm going to use an acid arrow after cutting down some guidelines in order to down the tree, which climbing down would take time, but I think he could have just climbed down. I think,
especially if it was like I'm saying, if it was a realistic tree, he could have climbed that like that. He would have been down. He would have been down on the ice rink before she even got down. So yeah, definitely a suspension.
Yeah. Again, great TV. But it was just like, was that the right plan, kiddo? Like, was that? Did you think that through? I mean, I appreciate the geometry with the guidelines she took down and then where to shoot the acid arrow, but I just, was that the right plan? So, but again, we then get to see her do the ice skating on her knees, shooting arrows, which again, that's cool. Like, just more of that. But she also sacrifices the high ground, which we know is bad. But for that entire fight, I'm like, it's beyond mutual combat. This is like free for all. And it's also the
Definitely
most
a melee. I mean, just those tracksuits just kept coming. Like, I was like, are they being mass produced? Like, they just keep showing up out of nowhere. Seemingly out of nowhere, because there were only a limited number of trucks that showed up. So I don't know where they found all these people that they just kept kind of coming onto the rink. It was a little absurd.
Some of the trucks were being used as troop transports. So you
Yeah.
do one open up and a whole bunch of guys which come out, which is illegal. You're not supposed to move human beings in the back. So there was an actual recent neo-Nazi march on Washington where they used Ryder trucks. And, there's the cell phone footage with cops watching these guys getting into the back of Ryder trucks. It's like, you go follow them because that's illegal. And now you can arrest all of those neo-Nazis who showed up at the Lincoln Memorial and their matching khakis and just screw those guys. Anyway, but that's how I feel. You think that's a moving violation. You're not supposed to do that, but it's a great fight. But there's one part of the fight that left me going, whoa, wait a minute. So we have a rider or one of the trucks where the driver and the passenger decide, let's do a kamikaze move onto the ice in order to kill the Hawkeyes. And Kate hears it, and she uses the Pym arrow to shrink them down. And then we have the great exchange of now what? And I need to call Scott. And then the owl comes and picks up the Ryder truck, and you can hear their little screams as they're taken away, just like the end of The Fly. And there are so many problems of like, what's the duty to the guys that, sure, they just tried to kill you? And the use of the Pym arrow made lots of sense to shrink them down to size, so that way they're not a threat. So
Manageable.
They're it's like, oh, look at you, you're now an ornament. What's the duty to them? To restore them back to regular size? Did either of you want to tag in on that problematic scene?
So obviously, like you have here in the outline, there's definitely reckless driving with the tracksuits. But I think what we need to put this into context, because it was just revealed that there was a deleted post-credit scene. Obviously, the post-credit scene we get is the kind of 3-minute musical excerpt from Rogers the Musical, which I was watching it and I was like, Stephen must be so happy with this.
So happy
to get the full version. I could do this right with the great Adam Pascal as cameo, but we'll get to that in a second. But there was it's supposed to be a post-credit scene showing the owl taking the little Trustabro truck to its nest, and you can fill in the details of what happened to those shrunken bros. But that was cut, obviously, because Disney does not want to show owls eating little shrunken bros. But yes, it was not, I don't think either Clint or Kate, when they shrunk the truck, obviously they were expecting I guess, enlarge them right in kind of a safe location, probably a prison cell, where they would be arrested. But they did not see this kind of foreseeable risk of the owl kind of swooping in So I don't know if they'd be on the hook for the death of the shrunken bros by Owl. Although I will say, I hope that Disney and all their merchandising of all things creates a little Trust a Bro ornament, because that would just be a little ornament. Would just be great.
Holidays.
Buy it.
Totally. Like little tiny screams you could hear, like, and it was like,
It's just like you did try to murder 2 people with your truck. So
Yeah.
it's just the use of lethal force was justified. So getting shrunk down was less than lethal. So be glad it wasn't an explosive arrow that was used. Which
I will say, though, I was very happy to see kind of a small owl get such credit as a vicious predator. As a proud owl myself, a proud burrowing owl from Florida Atlantic University, we are small, but we are mighty. So I was glad to see kind of the small owls get a good a reputation as vicious.
representation matters, right?
Exactly. 100%. Justice for small owls.
Yeah.
I mean, Clint's reaction to the owl flying away was something to the effect of, "Well, that's that." It's just we're not going to find them, so just next. And it was so fun. All right, we have the LARPers, who are the MVPs of this. So one of my buddies who's a cosplayer, they went to the premiere of the first 2 episodes, and they posted pictures with the actors who were the LARPers and just hanging out with them. I didn't realize they would have such a large role throughout the entire series. This wasn't just like a little cameo, to like, let's make fun of LARPers. It's like, no, they're going to be a key part of the story. They're going to be very important, and you're going to love all of them. And, from the special sound guy doing, from the fight from episode, I guess, 2, to, the police officer, the fact that they suit up it's like you have law enforcement and firefighters, at least one firefighter and at least one police officer. I don't know what the others are employed by, but they decide to ditch their maitre d' outfits to go for the cosplay to direct people, which kind of makes sense in this world. That if you've had alien invasions, half the population got decimated and then brought back to life, that you might be more prone to listen to someone dressed as a Viking than a police officer and giving emergency instructions. That probably would make sense, because it's what people are used to, at least in New York, where this seems to be a frequent occurrence, like aliens invaded again. But luckily, those Vikings saved us. Everything's okay.
I was going to say, it struck me too. It's such a funny, as we were talking about the kind of parallels in the show, when we were talking about a couple episodes before, when Clint was dressing up as a firefighter to go into the crime scene of Kate's apartment, and now, so he's an Avenger dressing up as a firefighter, and now in this episode we have firefighters dressing up as Avengers. It's a kind of like funny little shoes on the other foot now, but yeah,
that and just them explaining to potentially their colleagues we're basically Avengers. Awesome. And like, what's the police report look like for something of this magnitude that just took place, with like the trees downed, there's explosions, we have all of these tracksuit guys who are looks like most of them were not killed, that they were using non-lethal arrows. Kate was taking leg shots that probably would cause someone to bleed out and die horribly, but she wasn't intentionally taking lethal shots. Like, she wasn't aiming for the eye, or it's like, her MO is shooting through the throat. Like, that wasn't her thing. Like, she aimed for the thigh, because it's Disney. And we don't want, the funny actress brutally murdering people. But what's the police report look like? Well, we're giving them a mulligan. Like, well, we had to stop the evil mobster, so things got real and real crazy. And good thing those off-duty police officers dressed as Vikings were there to lend a hand. Gabby, want to tag in?
The one thing that was kind of a break in my viewing was Clint said in one of the earlier episodes that this was a LARPing group, tribe, whatever, of first responders, right? He like specifically uses that language to kind of categorize all of them as first responders. And I think even the girl who makes the costumes even says when he first gets there that the majority of their members are firefighters and cops. What I don't understand is they're kind of put in this role of first responders of getting everybody out of the building, right? That is the task Clint assigns to them of evacuate the building. Why are they so bad at it? They are terrible at it. Like people, like there's the scene where these people, they're trying to get people to move kind of in an orderly fashion, and these people are just not like they have no, they're like, oh well, yeah, and I'm like, no, like you're supposed to have training to do this, that like standing fashion of go here, go there, this is the safest route, that's not safe, all that kind of stuff. And they're just so bad at it that it's just kind of shocking. I was like, these people are either very bad first responders, which may like be the case given that one of them was willing to commit evidence tampering just kind of like at the drop of a hat, or they're not all first. It was just, it really kind of broke my immersion in the show. And just I could not get on board after that. But I did love, like you said, Josh, that when they came out in the costumes, and it would make sense, that would listen more to someone dressed in a Viking costume, could possibly be a new Avenger. I'm sure New Yorkers are like, sure, yeah, if you're in costume, you're an Avenger. Like, that's how we roll here. I don't know you, but like, sure. So yeah, I can see that. But yeah, that they are either the worst kind of first responders, which, like, no disrespect to first responders, they do a lot, and they have my utmost respect and appreciation, but those are bad. They need to be up on their training.
Yeah, I mean, this just really does underscore like the clothes do make the person. To be fair, I think that they were dressed as cater waiters, and so while you may trust them to pass you, your hors d'oeuvres or a glass of champagne, you might not necessarily trust someone dressed in a maroon tuxedo to direct you to the safest exit. But yeah, it's funny.
So my mom was a paramedic, so she in the first responder category. Some people aren't. It depends what their job was. Like, did the fireman actually direct people, or was he just fighting fires? Knows the police officer, like, what did she do? I mean, because I would expect someone who was a traffic cop who actually was out like giving, they would have the booming voice, they would have that command presence to like tell people where to drive. She might not have been that role. There's the other factor that, well, it was just fun. There's the other factor that sometimes people don't listen. Like, think of the flight that landed in the Hudson River. The flight attendants didn't tell people to put on life jackets before getting on the wings. And like, that was just dumb. Like, you see all these people, you're in the Hudson River and no one put on a life jacket, and they're all under the seats in the airplane. Or there was another plane flight where the plane depressurized and the mask came down, and somebody took a selfie of everyone, and no one's wearing the mask correctly. Like, they all have their, it's the, my nose is still free. It's like, well, you're gonna suffocate. Like, that's just you're and like everyone just looked around and did it the wrong way. And I don't know if the flight attendants were able to give instructions or what, but people do stuff wrong all the time. in emergencies. So maybe seeing the Viking lady was enough of a wake up call to realize I have to go this way. That could be it. Uh, that said, it was great to see Clint and Kate go home for Christmas. That was adorable. Apparently, the dog's named Lucky. Did
Yes,
either
so
of
that
you?
is its comic book name. So it went from Pizza Dog, which was interesting. That's how they marketed it in all the like the posters, and they were, which is weird because you see like you see that sometimes where we saw that with Goose. Carol's Flurkin. I don't remember what his comic book name is, but it's different. They named him Goose, a kind of Top Gun reference. But you see that changing, and then to have him actually get his kind of comic book name was satisfying. And since we are on the kind of closing scene of the episode, I was right. I like being right. I will take everybody's applause now of being right. Calling that Laura Barton was a SHIELD agent, and not just a SHIELD agent. She was a I do not call that the watch belonged to her because that looks like a completely different watch than the watch she has in the finale. The watch in the first episode definitely looked like a men's Rolex. That one looks more like a women's Rolex. So I think there may have been some lack of continuity there. But that being said, to see that Laura was a SHIELD agent, was a past version of Mockingbird, was definitely very cool, and I'd like to see her story now because that would be awesome.
Down to the 19. So it's like nice. And here's the other, maybe there was more than one watch. So, because I thought it had start colors in the first episode, but I would need to go back to rewatch it to be sure. That said, the other key moment for me was Clint saying, "You're my partner," because that was, again, the nice role reversal, because he's doing everything else was like, we're not partners. I don't need another dead person type mindset. And he does have the holiday reversion, and just trying to be a decent guy and not leaving Kate to deal with the fact that her mom's tied up with the Kingpin and things are actually way worse than she thought. I also enjoyed the fact that Jack wasn't a complete schmuck. Like, he actually does the reversal of, like, he's likable all of a sudden. And Goofy doesn't use his wrong phraseology, but I think he'll be a good LARPer.
Yeah. I think that was key, and it's important to touch on kind of the Jack transformation, because I think that's what we saw post Falcon and for all this kind of talk by the producers and the writers. John's character, John Walker's character, was supposed to be liked at the end, right? He was supposed to go from a villain to being liked in the end, and that really didn't happen. I don't know kind of what shoe got dropped or whatever, but he doesn't go from smashing somebody's head in to being like, oh, you're supposed to like this guy. Whereas Jack, what was interesting was we never got our dislike of him came through Kate's eyes, right? That she didn't trust him, that he moved, so quickly with her mother, that she believed him to be the suspect, the main suspect of, Armand's murder. The fact that he just seemed a little odd, right? That could also interpret as we were seeing everything. We were seeing Jack through Kate's eyes, right? Although the sword thing all around the house is just weird. But we were seeing that all through Kate's eyes. So now that Kate trusts him, those kind of oddities get kind of reframed, that he's just an odd dude who has these kind of quirks. He clearly doesn't, he doesn't know kind of idioms and all of that kind of stuff. But they're just quirky, not necessarily nefarious in any way. And that he may have just been involved in this kind of organization by virtue of his connection to Eleanor, not that he was specifically a bad dude himself. He was kind of an innocent, kind of roped in to all of this. So it's very interesting how they did that. And they did it successfully. They stuck the landing on that one as opposed to whatever the heck they were trying to do with John Walker in Falcon and Winter Soldier, because that was a mess.
Yeah, well, his uncle moment with Armand the Seventh, when the 9-year-old wants the wine collection, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, it's like, are the parents raising a delinquent? Is this the kid so polluted with money he thinks he can drink wine? Is he drinking wine? And the uncle exchange of the kid just kind of being a brat, and Jack switching to, remember when you peed your pants in the Hamptons? I do. Everyone does. It was just, again, that was like weapons hot, fire, and like taking down the only way an uncle can take down a 9-year-old, he took the shot. And it's just like, that was actually funny. I was on board. I was suddenly rooting for this guy who I thought was kind of swarmy at the beginning. It's like, I suddenly like him. Even though he is weird, but I hope he has fun with the LARPers, and I hope he doesn't marry Eleanor, because that's just bad mojo right there.
Yeah, we're all rooting for him at the end. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it worked. Like, no one rooted for John Walker at the end. It's like, you beheaded a dude. Yeah. We don't like you. You should be prosecuted, as opposed to, I'm okay with this guy. And but yes, we should now talk about the musical number. I've watched it 3 times. I've had tears in my eyes each viewing.
It gets better and better. It gets better and better. I heard they had, after the first episode, they had the recording of the full song online. So I'd listened to the song a number of times, but I'd never dreamed that we would get to see the full staging of the musical number, and I was so thrilled to see it. It was so funny, and it's just so perfectly Broadway, like the choreography, like the little spins. It was just amazing. I'm so happy. My little theater kid was fed that day. It's so great.
Yeah, I was not a fan. I'm gonna put my hot take, controversial opinion out there. I was not a fan. I do appreciate, first, I didn't like it, not for the fact of, we didn't get like some preview or whatever. I really like the fact of, Marvel kind of playing that kind of fake out sometimes, like they did with, I believe it was Homecoming, where they have the Captain America PSA at the end, as opposed to kind of a preview post-credit scene. That I'm fine with. I just think they should have used, there was a kind of closing scene that should have happened. I think, especially the way they panned out, I thought they were going to turn the camera around to somebody in the audience, right? And that would have been a perfect bookend to got introduced to Rogers with, right, from this perspective of trauma and pain and emotion. I really wanted to see somebody in the audience that, like Yelena, kind of like, this is ridiculous kind of thing, or something silly like that was just like getting a different perspective on somebody observing this, right? Or any kind of number of the characters we saw in Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man No Way Home takes place at the same time as Hawkeye, and to see the characters, the audience, would have been neat, right? Because they did make a point to show the Rogers the Musical billboards in Spider-Man No Way Home, right? They even updated the trailer right after Hawkeye premiered to show that in the trailers. So that would have been, I think that was what was missing, that it didn't feel kind of complete. But I appreciate the kind of levity it brought, but I wanted that little bit extra.
I love the idea of having Yelena in the audience, because she could have, or instead she could have also like been leaping to her feet and like loving it, because she was there to see. She said she wanted to see a couple things in New York, so that could have been like her one Broadway show that she treated herself to before flying home. That would have been really funny.
Yeah.
I expected to actually see her. I thought we were going to see any of the other characters would have been fun, or again, you could go down the list. Bucky watching it would be hysterical. Or again, he wrote it. Like I would be fine with that. That I could enjoy that humor of like, I wrote it. I'd be okay with that. But when they showed it, I've yet to not have tears in my eyes, just from the pure spectacle of they built the stage, like they put the song together, like they wouldn't have that Chekhov's gun of the musical going off. And I mean, sure, it's a condensed story. It's like no one would go to a Broadway play for like 7 minutes, and that's that. But the director, seeing him like being so into it and conducting everything, it was just, for me, it was perfect. I did think of you, Stephen. I absolutely thought of you. And
I'm pretty sure it was Mark Scheinman who is directing it, who was one of the writers of it. And there's articles about him talking about how he didn't know anything about the MCU, but his husband's a really big fan. So when he was called to write the song, his husband was telling him, like, you have to figure out a word to rhyme with Chitauri. It was a really great process to get closer to his husband, because they got to know the MCU together. It's really
beautiful.
That's awesome.
I love it so much. It was a nice lighthearted ending. And again, I giggled. I did laugh. So, but for me, this overall, I have very high regard for this show, just because, it's satisfying. It's well written. I love Kingpin, and I have 3 new action figures for some future blog posts that I need to set up and take. But yeah, it was just a wicked good time for the show. So, Stephen, any other closing remarks?
Gosh, it's been so fun watching this show and talking to you all about it. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's such a gratifying holiday experience. Peaked right at the right time, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, then we get Boba Fett next. So, Gabby.
So excited.
I loved it. I mean, what I am most excited for coming out of the finale is the Echo spinoff. I mean, of the kind of transformation of Maya just taking her hair down, and you really saw her, just this whole character shift, right? Her world had really been rocked. And I think what'll be exciting, have her go into character of Echo, separate superhero, or if they have her take on the mantle of Ronin, right? She really fits where her character is. She fits the true definition of Ronin, because a Ronin is a samurai without a master, and she has just lost her master, right? She has kind of cut off all these ties with Kingpin, or maybe cut off Kingpin, depending on how you read that scene. But she has kind of cut off ties with all her previous life and any master she had. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops. So I am super psyched for that show. And I can't wait to learn more about it, what kind of be.
Sure.
Yeah, and seeing Kingpin do language, I have a hope this inspires a lot of people to learn basic American Sign Language. If that is inspiration, turns into like a movement or just a social norm, I think that'd be really positive. So I cautiously optimistic, just because they, again, at least two of the actors learned American Sign Language, maybe more. so, uh, so we shall see. So with that, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We're going to be right back with Book of Boba Fett. So I don't know all of us who are going to be covering that, but that's later. so a fun way to end 21. And we will be back. So everyone, thank you for joining us on this adventure. And we will see everyone soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky.